Imagine standing at the edge of freedom. The Red Sea has already split. Chains are broken. Egypt is behind you. But the Promised Land is not yet in sight. That space between deliverance and destiny is where the Book of Numbers lives. The Book of Numbers is the fourth book of the Bible and part of the Torah, traditionally written by Moses. In Hebrew, it's called Bimidbar. Text appears on screen, Bimidbar, in the wilderness, which means in the wilderness. That title tells the real story. While English calls it Numbers because it begins with two major censuses of the Israelites. The heart of the book isn't math, it's movement, it's testing, it's transformation. Jewish and Christian tradition hold that Moses wrote Numbers during Israel's wilderness journey. The people had already been rescued from Egypt. They had received God's law. Now they were being prepared. The census wasn't random, it was preparation. God was shaping a nation, not just spiritually, but structurally. Every tribe counted, every family mattered, every person had a place. Numbers begins at Mount Sinai. The tribes are arranged. The tabernacle stands at the center. God's presence, a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night, leads them. Everything seems ready. But then, fear creeps in. When 12 spies are sent into Canaan, 10 return with panic. Only 2, Joshua and Caleb, trust God's promise. The people choose fear over faith, and that decision changes everything. Instead of entering the Promised Land, they wander for 40 years. An entire generation passes in the wilderness, not because God failed, but because they doubted. Numbers is not just about counting people. It's about what happens when freedom meets fear, when faith meets pressure, when promise meets patience. The wilderness becomes a classroom. There are rebellions, complaints about food, moments of divine judgment, moments of astonishing mercy. Even Moses, the great leader, stumbles. Yet through it all, God remains faithful. The older generation fades away, a new generation rises, and by the end of the book, they are once again standing at the edge of the Promised Land, ready to try again. The wilderness story echoes powerfully in the New Testament. Jesus himself enters the wilderness for 40 days. Where Israel failed, Jesus obeyed. When Israel complained about bread, Jesus declared, "Man shall not live by bread alone." Matthew 4:4. And in Numbers 21, when poisonous snakes attack the people, God tells Moses to lift up a bronze serpent on a pole. Anyone who looks at it lives. Centuries later, Jesus says, "Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up." John 3:14. The wilderness serpent becomes a symbol of the cross. Where sin brought death, faith brings life. Because most of life feels like the wilderness. We live between the promise and the fulfillment, between the prayer and the answer, between the calling and the breakthrough. Numbers reminds us, God counts you. Delay is not denial. Faith determines direction. A setback is not the end of your story. Even when a generation failed, God's promise did not. He is faithful across time, across doubt, across deserts. If Genesis is beginnings, if Exodus is freedom, if Leviticus is holiness, then Numbers is endurance. It asks one question: will you trust God in the waiting? Because sometimes the wilderness is not punishment, it's preparation. And sometimes the long road is how God shapes strong faith.